Clara Dawson was setting down the last cup of coffee when she saw the signature that could destroy 800 lives. At the far end of the glass table, Daniel Langford, chief executive of Langford Manufacturing, held a pen above a contract worth $40 million. The buyer from Thorn Capital had already signed. Nolan Pierce, Daniel's chief operating officer and oldest advisor, stood beside him with one hand resting on the back of his chair. "Just the final page," Nolan said. "Then Riverside gets the future we promised." Clara had been told to set down the tray and leave. They were expected to remember coffee orders, smile at visitors, and become invisible when important people began talking. But the name above Daniel's signature line stopped her. Evelyn M. Langford. The family trust owned enough of the Riverside factory that Evelyn's approval was required before it could be sold. Her signature curved across the page in smooth black ink. It was too smooth. Clara's fingers tightened around the tray. Daniel lowered his pen. "Mr. Langford," she whispered, "that signature is wrong." The room went silent. Nolan gave a short laugh. "Excuse me?" Daniel's pen stopped a fraction above the paper. He looked at Clara, then at the contract. "What did you say?" Clara's heart struck hard against her ribs. She needed this job. It paid for the apartment she shared with her father, Frank, whose memory had begun slipping away one ordinary day at a time. Still, she stepped closer. "Mrs. Langford doesn't make the E that way," Clara said. "And she pauses twice when she writes her last name. Once after the G and once before the final D. Her hand shakes, so the ink gathers in two little dots." Nolan's smile disappeared. "Our receptionist is now a handwriting expert." "No," Clara said. "I just watch people." Daniel picked up the contract. The signature was one confident stroke, copied from a time before age had weakened Evelyn's hand. "How would you know how my mother signs her name?" he asked. Clara looked toward Nolan. His face had gone pale. "Because she has signed the visitor book downstairs every Thursday for the last 8 weeks. Daniel stood so quickly that his chair rolled backward. "My mother has not entered this building in 11 years. She was here yesterday," Clara said. "She waited 3 hours. Nolan moved between them. "Daniel, this is absurd. Evelyn's consent was verified by counsel. We have 2 banks waiting and a deadline in 9 minutes. Daniel closed the contract. "Then the banks can wait. You understand there is an $8 million breach penalty," the buyer said. "No one leaves with the original documents," Daniel said. He pressed the security button beneath the table. Nolan reached for the contract, but Daniel pulled it away. For the first time, Clara saw fear in the older man's eyes. Daniel led her downstairs himself. The lobby was full of late afternoon light, delivery carts, and employees pretending not to stare. Clara opened the leather visitor book. Thursday's page was gone. "So were the 7 Thursdays before it." "I didn't remove them," she said. Daniel checked the camera archive. Every recording that showed Evelyn entering the lobby had been deleted. "Who has access?" "Security," Clara said. "And Mr. Pierce's office." Nolan came out of the elevator with 2 attorneys behind him. "This has gone far enough. Daniel, if you sabotage this sale over the imagination of an employee, the board will remove you." Clara heard the warning beneath his words. She reached under her desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. "Mrs. Langford left letters," she said. "Mr. Pierce told me to shred them. I couldn't." She placed 7 pale blue envelopes in Daniel's hands. Each one carried Evelyn's trembling signature. Each one had been addressed to her son. Daniel stared at them as though they had crossed an ocean to find him. On the last envelope, written in weaker ink, were 9 words. "Daniel, the man you trust knows why Grace died." Daniel's face lost all color. Grace had been his younger sister. She had died inside the Riverside factory 18 years earlier. And the man Daniel trusted most was standing 10 feet away. Daniel carried the letters to his office and locked the door behind Clara. He did not offer her a seat. He stood at the window with the envelopes pressed against his palm, fighting the anger in his voice. "Why didn't these reach me?" "The first time your mother came, Mr. Pierce met her in the lobby," Clara said. "After she left, he took her letter. The next week, he told me you had asked that she be turned away. By the 4th week, he ordered me to destroy anything she left. But you kept them. My father forgets my name some mornings, Clara said. He has never forgotten that opening someone else's mail is wrong. The answer was simple, but it carried more weight than Nolan's stack of legal opinions. He opened the first envelope. Evelyn's letter contained no apology and no demand. She wrote that the Riverside sale must not proceed. She had never approved it. She believed someone had copied her old signature from a trust document. She asked Daniel to meet her, just once, in a place where Nolan could not control the door. The next 5 letters became more urgent. The 7th mentioned Grace. Daniel sat down. My mother and I stopped speaking after the fire, he said. Grace was the safety director at Riverside. A locked exit trapped 6 night shift workers. She went back for them. Came out. She didn't. Nolan found a cost order signed by my mother. It delayed the new exit system. She never denied it. Maybe nobody let her, Clara said. Daniel flinched, not because her words were cruel, but because they were possible. He called every number written in the letters. The last belonged to St. Anne's Medical Center. A nurse said Evelyn had been admitted that morning after collapsing at her assisted living apartment. Daniel grabbed his coat, then stopped. Come with me. I'm your receptionist. Right now, you're the only person I know she trusted enough to keep coming back to. At the hospital, Daniel froze outside room 614. Through the narrow window, his mother looked smaller than he remembered. Her white hair lay loose against the pillow. A folded cardigan rested on the chair beside her, still carrying the visitor badge Clara had printed the day before. Daniel took one step back. Clara did not touch him. She sat in your lobby 8 times, she said softly. You can stand in her doorway once. He entered. Evelyn opened her eyes. For several seconds, mother and son only stared at each other. 11 years of birthdays, funerals, and unanswered Christmas cards filled the space between them. You got my letters, she said. Clara saved them. Evelyn looked past him. Her face warmed when she saw the receptionist. The woman who always brought me tea. Clara placed Evelyn's cardigan around her shoulders. The room was cold, and Daniel watched his mother pull it close like a child receiving a blanket. Did you sign the sale consent? He asked. No. Did you sign the order that delayed the fire exits? Evelyn's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. No. Daniel turned away. His hand covered his mouth. Why didn't you fight me harder? I tried until you told me Grace would still be alive if I had never entered this family. He closed his eyes. The words had been spoken at a funeral, but grief did not make them disappear. Clara moved toward the door. Please stay, Evelyn said. Both of you need to hear this. She explained that Nolan had brought the sale papers to her apartment 3 weeks earlier. When she refused to sign, he reminded her that old evidence could be made to point at innocent people. Then he mentioned a box that had survived the fire. He is not forging my name only for the money, Evelyn said. He needs Riverside torn down before someone finds what is still there. What evidence? Daniel asked. Evelyn looked at Clara's employee badge. Her hand began to tremble. Dawson, she whispered. Are you Frank Dawson's daughter? Clara nodded. Evelyn gripped the edge of her blanket. Then your father is the man who carried my daughter out of that fire. Clara had heard her father wake from nightmares for 18 years. She had seen him check the apartment door 3 times before bed and turn away whenever a television showed flames. But Frank had never said he carried Grace Langford out of Riverside. At 76, his clear days arrived without warning and left just as quickly. That evening, Clara found him at their kitchen table arranging sugar packets into straight red and white rows. Dad, do you remember Grace Langford? Frank's hand stopped. One packet slipped between his fingers. I couldn't get the chain off, he said. Daniel stood in the doorway behind Clara. He had insisted on coming, but the powerful man from the boardroom now held his coat over one arm and waited for permission to enter a room with peeling paint. Frank looked up at him. You have Henry's eyes. Daniel's father had founded Langford Manufacturing. Clara knelt beside Frank. What chain? East exit. Nolan said lock it during inventory. Chemicals were leaving through that door at night. Grace found out. His breathing quickened. Clara covered his hand with hers. You're home, she said. You're with me. Frank stared at Daniel. She went back, because Eddie was only 19. Told me to take the others. Ceiling came down before I reached her again. Daniel lowered himself into the chair across from him. You brought her out. Too late. You brought her home. Frank's eyes filled. For one clear moment, he seemed to understand who was sitting before him. Red box, he whispered. He pointed toward the hall closet. Behind winter blankets and an old vacuum sat the metal lunchbox Clara remembered from childhood. Its red paint was blistered black along one side. Inside were a brass key, a photograph, and 3 folded maintenance reports wrapped in wax paper. The photograph showed Grace in a hard hat, laughing beside Frank and 4 night shift workers. On the back, she had written, "People are not an expense, Danny. Don't let this place forget." Daniel pressed the photograph to his chest. The maintenance reports were more dangerous. Each warned that solvent drums were being stored near an electrical panel and that the east exit had been chained during unrecorded shipments. Frank had signed them. Grace had countersigned them. Across the final report, in Nolan's handwriting, were the words, "Hold until after quarterly review. Do not circulate." Daniel photographed every page. A knock struck the apartment door. Nolan entered before Clara could reach it. 2 company security officers remained in the hallway. You used a corporate vehicle to remove confidential records, Nolan told Daniel. The board has called an emergency session. Then he looked at Clara. You are suspended, effective immediately. Clara stood. You don't have the authority to suspend me. I do when an employee steals company property. She lifted the scorched lunchbox. This belongs to my father. Nolan's gaze settled on it for half a second too long. Daniel stepped forward. Leave her out of this. She put herself in it. Nolan's voice softened. Ms. Dawson, your father receives a company pension and medical supplement. Investigations create delays. Paperwork gets reviewed. People can lose benefits they thought were secure. Frank began gathering the sugar packets, trying to make the rows straight again. Clara felt fear rise in her throat. She also felt her father's hand searching for hers beneath the table. Is that a threat? She asked. It is a chance to be sensible. Nolan placed a severance agreement on the counter. Sign this. Return the box. Your father's care remains untouched. Clara read the amount. It was more money than she had ever seen at one time. It could pay for 2 years of memory care. She picked up the pen. Nolan smiled. Clara drew a line through the agreement and wrote one word across it. No. Clara understood courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing what fear would never control inside her again. My father spent 18 years being afraid, she said. You don't get the rest of his life, too. Nolan's face hardened. Then you will both learn what principles cost. After he left, Daniel quietly promised he would protect them. Clara shook her head. Don't protect me. Help me finish what my father started. She turned the brass key over. A small metal tag hung from it. Riverside, Booth 6. Frank grabbed Daniel's wrist before his memory slipped away again. Listen to the end, he said. That is where Grace tells you the truth. Riverside Works had once run through every hour of the night. Now half its windows were dark, and the old assembly wing waited for the sale that would decide whether it lived or disappeared. Daniel used his executive badge to enter after midnight. Clara carried the red lunchbox. Evelyn, discharged against her doctor's advice, waited in Daniel's car with a blanket around her shoulders and refused to be taken home. Booth 6 stood above the factory floor. Years earlier, supervisors had used it to record maintenance notes and shift reports. The brass key opened a steel cabinet beneath the desk. Inside lay a small tape recorder sealed in a plastic evidence bag. Clara pressed play. At first, there was only machinery. Then Frank's younger voice listed broken lights and a leaking line. A door opened. Nolan spoke next. Keep the east exit chained until the truck is loaded. Grace answered him. Those drums aren't on the manifest. Your father approved the transfer. Then show me. There was a pause. Go home, Grace. Open the exit, Nolan. The recording clicked off. When it resumed, an alarm screamed in the background. Frank was coughing. Men shouted. Metal crashed. Then Grace's voice came close to the recorder. Frank, take this. If I don't get out, make Daniel hear it. Her breath broke. Tell him this company is its people. Not the buildings. Not the money. The people. The tape ended. Beside her, Evelyn closed her eyes. She had waited 18 years to hear Grace's voice again, and the sound broke something grief had kept frozen. Daniel sat on the dusty floor. For 18 years, he had carried anger because it felt easier than carrying grief. He had blamed his mother. He had buried his sister beneath quarterly reports, acquisitions, and a schedule so full that no one could ask him if he was lonely. Now Grace's last words filled the dark booth. Clara sat beside him, leaving enough space for dignity, but not enough for isolation. I told my mother she killed her, Daniel said. You believed a lie. I chose the lie. It gave me someone to hate. Clara looked through the glass at rows of silent machines. Then choose something different now. Downstairs, Daniel knelt beside the car and played the recording for Evelyn. She listened without moving until Grace said, "The people." Then Evelyn reached through the open window and placed her palm against her son's face. I should have kept fighting for you, she said. I should have opened the door. Their foreheads touched. No apology could return the missing years, but the first piece of forgiveness passed between them in silence. Clara turned away and saw headlights moving near the loading dock. A black sedan stopped beside them. Nolan stepped out. He did not pretend to be surprised. That recording proves I ordered a door secured during an inventory violation, he said. It does not prove I started a fire. You forged my mother's signature, Daniel said. I did what this family was too weak to do. Nolan pointed toward the dark plant. Riverside has lost money for 6 years. The sale saves the rest of the company. Thorne promised to keep it open for 90 days. Nolan handed Daniel a document marked Schedule K. It authorized Thorne Capital to close the factory, sell the land, and eliminate all 800 jobs. Daniel had never seen it. Why show me this? Daniel asked. Because the board has. They know the truth, and they will approve the sale anyway. Clara studied the document. One company name appeared repeatedly beneath the legal language, Northline Holdings. Who owns Northline? She asked. Nolan smiled without warmth. You really are wasted at a front desk. Daniel searched the state business registry on his phone. Northline belonged to Nolan's brother-in-law. It would receive the Riverside land after the sale. Its projected profit was $62 million. The $40 million rescue had never been a rescue. It was a theft wrapped in signatures. Nolan looked at the three of them, an old woman, a suspended receptionist, and a CEO whose own board was turning against him. By 9 tomorrow morning, I will be acting chief executive, he said. At 9:15, I will sign the deal. Daniel lifted the recorder. Not after people hear this. Then let them hear all of it. Nolan's eyes moved to Clara, including the report that says Frank Dawson failed to unlock the east exit. Clara's stomach dropped. Nolan returned to his car. As it disappeared, Daniel's phone began filling with news alerts. Someone had leaked a story claiming he had halted a $40 million rescue because of an unstable employee and her confused father. Before Clara could read further, her own phone rang. The memory care nurse was crying. Frank was gone. Clara reached the apartment in 12 minutes. Frank's coat was missing. So were his bus pass and the photograph of Grace. Nothing in the room suggested a struggle, but fear did not need evidence. It filled every empty space. Daniel called the police and his security director. Clara called hospitals, bus stations, and every place her father still remembered on difficult days. At 5 in the morning, a city bus driver answered the number on Frank's medical bracelet. She had dropped him near Riverside Works. They found him beneath the factory's memorial wall. He sat on a bench with Grace's photograph against his heart. His cheek was cut where he had fallen, and his hands were blue with cold. Clara ran to him. Dad, why did you leave? I wasn't lost, he said. His voice was weak, but clear. I came to tell them I'm done hiding. The wall behind him carried the 6 names from the fire. Frank touched Grace's name. Nolan told the investigators I forgot the lock. Said he would take your mother's pension if I argued. She was sick then. I chose her medicine over the truth. Clara wrapped him in her coat. You were scared. So were you last night. He looked at the red lunchbox in her hand. But you wrote no. Daniel knelt before him. Mr. Dawson, the company failed you. Frank shook his head. Men failed us. A company is whatever its people choose next. By 7, Daniel's board had assembled on the top floor. The lenders had threatened to freeze Langford Manufacturing's credit unless the Riverside sale closed that morning. Without credit, 4,000 employees across 3 states might miss their next paycheck. Nolan had built the perfect choice: sacrifice 800 people or risk 4,000 more. News vans crowded the street. The television in the hospital waiting room showed Clara's employee photograph beside the words "Receptionist derails rescue deal." Another report called Frank a former supervisor whose negligence may have caused the fatal fire. Clara reached for the remote, but Frank stopped her. Let it play. Daniel's daughter, Sophie, arrived in a gray suit with a legal folder under her arm. She was 32, a corporate attorney, and she had inherited her father's controlled expression. The board asked me to talk sense into you, she told Daniel. If you release an old tape without authentication, Thorne will sue. If you accuse Nolan publicly, he will bury this family in defamation claims. Then she saw Evelyn sitting beside Frank's bed. Grandmother? Evelyn opened her arms. Sophie hesitated only a second before crossing the room. The embrace was awkward, then fierce. Daniel watched his mother hold the daughter she had known only through photographs. Your father was wrong about me, Evelyn said. But I was wrong to let shame keep me away from you. Sophie looked at the forged sale consent, the hidden Schedule K, and the maintenance reports. Her certainty began to fracture. This is enough to ask questions, she said. It may not be enough to stop the board in time. Frank lifted the recorder. Then use my name. Clara turned to him. Dad, no. I'll make a sworn statement. All of it.
The chain.
The chemicals. The lie I signed because I was afraid. They will blame you. Some already do. He squeezed her hand. The truth doesn't become cheaper because you wait. Clara began to cry. For years, she had protected her father by making his world smaller and safer. Now protecting him meant allowing him to walk into the very pain she wanted to keep away. She placed the photograph beside him and called a notary. While the notary prepared the affidavit, Frank wrote Clara's name without help. The letters shook, but she held the page as if it were the finest certificate he had ever earned in his long life. At 8:30, the board offered Daniel one final bargain. Sign the sale, remain chief executive, and let an internal committee review Nolan later. Refuse, and Nolan would be appointed acting CEO immediately. Daniel removed his father's old watch from his wrist. Every Langford chief executive had worn it since the company opened. He placed it on the boardroom table. If keeping this chair requires me to sell people to a man who forged my mother's name, the chair is already empty. The vote to suspend him passed 7-4. Nolan took Daniel's seat. Security escorted Daniel to the lobby, where Clara waited with Frank's affidavit. Employees gathered behind the glass doors, watching the man who had led them for 20 years carry one cardboard box. I'm sorry, Daniel told Clara. I have no authority left to stop him. She looked at the reception desk where she had answered 10,000 calls, printed thousands of badges, and watched every person Nolan believed was beneath his notice. Maybe authority isn't what we need. Upstairs, the board secretary placed a fresh copy of the sale agreement before Nolan. The lobby clock changed to 9:14. Clara had 60 seconds to find the truth everyone powerful had missed. Clara sat in her old chair and opened the visitor system. Nolan had torn pages from a book and erased camera files, but the lobby was more than a room. It was a memory made from badge printers, delivery scans, parking validations, and phone logs. What are you looking for? Sophie asked. A pattern. June Alvarez, the morning receptionist, slipped into the chair beside her. Nolan had walked past June without learning her name. Now she opened the backup menu he did not know existed. The system saves a weekly audit copy, June said. You taught me never to trust one record. Clara smiled. Together, The two women restored parking numbers, visitor photographs, and elevator destinations. A record Nolan believed disposable began rebuilding itself line by line. Delivery drivers remembered his rushed packages. A security guard admitted he had been told to escort Evelyn out before Daniel could see her. None of the details alone could stop a sale, but together they showed planning, pressure, and concealment. Daniel watched them work. He had spent years believing information moved down from corner offices. Now he saw the company's memory moving upward from the people who opened its doors. Clara searched Northline Holdings. 3 visits appeared. Each visitor had been registered as a consultant for Thorn Capital months before the sale was announced. All 3 had gone directly to Nolan's office. She opened the badge images. The third man was Nolan's brother-in-law. The printer record also showed Evelyn's 8 visits. Nolan had deleted video, not the timestamps attached to her badges. Each time, his private extension had called security within 2 minutes of her arrival. That proves he knew she was trying to reach Daniel, Sophie said. We still need evidence tying him to the signature. Clara remembered a delivery from 6 weeks earlier. Nolan's assistant, Karen Fields, had rushed downstairs to collect it before the regular mail pickup. The sender had been a document restoration firm. She found the scan in the Courier Archive, Langford Family Trust, high-resolution reproduction. The elevator opened. Karen stepped into the lobby with tears in her eyes. Mr. Pierce wants the original visitor server wiped, she said. He told me to say it failed. Clara stood. You can still say no. You don't understand. My son starts college next month. Nolan knows I need this job. Clara did understand. She showed Karen the crossed-out severance agreement. He offered to protect my father if I helped him bury the truth. Fear always sounds reasonable when it uses someone you love. Karen looked toward the boardroom floor. Then she removed a small drive from her pocket. The office printer saves temporary copies, she said. I found this after he ordered the deletion. On the drive were draft versions of Evelyn's consent. In the first, her signature appeared as a pale image lifted from a trust document signed 14 years earlier. In the last, the image had been darkened and placed above a false notary stamp. There was also an email from Nolan to Northline. Once Daniel signs, demolition can begin. The old wing must be cleared before any independent inspection. Sophie moved fast. She sent the files, Frank's affidavit, and Evelyn's statement to a judge, the state attorney general, and the company's lenders. Daniel called the bank chairman and pledged his personal shares as security for a 72-hour credit extension. You could lose everything, Clara said. Not everything, he answered, looking at Evelyn and Sophie. The bank agreed to pause the credit freeze if a court stopped the sale. At 9:15, Nolan uncapped his pen. The boardroom doors were locked, but Clara knew every internal number in the building. She dialed the conference speaker at the center of the table. Nolan answered. What? Clara placed Evelyn beside the phone. You copied the signature of the woman I was 14 years ago, Evelyn said. You should have paid attention to the woman I became. Nolan hung up. The elevator numbers descended from 34. At 9:17, a court clerk emailed Sophie a temporary restraining order. At 9:18, the lenders withdrew their closing authorization. At 9:19, Karen signed a statement identifying every file Nolan had ordered her to destroy. The elevator doors opened. 2 state investigators stepped out with company security behind them. Daniel, Evelyn, Sophie, Frank, and Clara entered the elevator going up. No one spoke during the climb. When the doors opened on the boardroom floor, Nolan was still sitting in Daniel's chair. The contract lay before him and signed. He smiled at Clara as if she had merely delayed the inevitable. Do you really think a receptionist gets to decide the future of this company? He asked. Clara held up the 7 blue envelopes. No, she said. The truth does. Then the investigators opened the boardroom doors. The same people who had ignored Clara an hour earlier moved aside to let her enter. Sophie placed the restraining order on the table. Karen's drive followed. Then came the visitor records, the courier scan, Frank's affidavit, the hidden Schedule K, and Evelyn's original trust document. Nolan did not deny the signature. Riverside was dying, he said. Daniel refused to close it because Grace died there. Evelyn refused because guilt made her sentimental. I found a buyer, protected the other plants, and made the decision none of you had the courage to make. You also gave the land to your own family company, one director said. I earned that. Nolan struck the table with his palm. I spent 30 years cleaning up Langford mistakes. Daniel looked at the man who had stood beside him at his father's funeral and poured drinks after Grace died. You let me hate my mother because it made me easier to control. You wanted someone to blame. I did, Daniel said. That is my shame. What you did with it is yours. Evelyn placed the forged consent beside her real signature. The difference was obvious now, one perfect and empty, the other unsteady and alive. You thought weakness was a shaking hand, she told Nolan. Weakness was needing another person's name because your own could not survive the truth. The board canceled the sale unanimously. It removed Nolan from every office and authorized an independent investigation into both the current fraud and the Riverside fire. The state investigators escorted him out to face questioning for forgery, attempted fraud, evidence destruction, and conspiracy. At the door, Nolan looked back at Clara. You ruined thousands of people to save 800. Clara did not move.
No.
You made us believe people had to be chosen in groups. The credit extension gave Langford 72 hours, not a miracle. Daniel returned to the table without putting on his father's watch. He proposed selling the corporate aircraft, cutting executive bonuses, and placing his personal shares behind a recovery loan. Sophie had already contacted a state manufacturing fund. Riverside's workers offered a profit-sharing plan in exchange for temporary reduced hours, with every lost hour repaid if the plant recovered. For the first time, the plan was built with the people who would live with it. When Clara returned to the lobby, employees were frightened about mortgages, medicine, and next week's groceries. Rosa Martinez, a machinist with 27 years at Riverside, stepped forward and handed Clara a list. Every name belonged to a worker willing to help with the recovery plan. We are not asking Daniel to save us, Rosa said. We are asking for a chance to save the place with him. Daniel read the names. Some belonged to people he had met. Most did not. That realization humbled him more than losing his title had. He signed the bottom of the list, not as chief executive, but as the first person promising to share the risk. Frank added his name beneath Daniel's. The board reinstated Daniel. He accepted only after it approved independent worker representation and a protected ethics office that answered to the full board, not the CEO. Who will lead it? A director asked. Daniel looked at Clara. She shook her head. I caught one bad signature. That doesn't make me qualified. No, Daniel said. But 8 years caring for your father taught you patience. 20 years as a payroll clerk taught you records. And 1 minute in that boardroom taught all of us that you speak when silence is safer. Clara agreed to train for the position, on one condition. Karen would keep her job and help rebuild the reporting system. Later, Daniel met Frank beneath the memorial wall. He returned Grace's photograph and placed his father's watch in Frank's scarred palm. Grace came home because you kept this safe, Daniel said. Frank studied the watch, then closed Daniel's fingers around it. She came home because someone finally listened. Daniel fastened the watch around his wrist again, not as a symbol of power, but as a promise. Across the parking lot, the first shift lights came on inside Riverside. 1 row at a time. The factory woke up. 1 year later, Riverside Works had hired 43 new employees. No wrecking crew ever came. The old supervisor's booth became a small memorial room. Grace's photograph hung beside Frank's maintenance reports. Beneath them sat the red lunchbox, its burned side left exactly as it was. Frank visited on the anniversary of the fire. His memory had grown thinner, but when Daniel played the tape, he whispered Grace's final words before the recording reached them. The people, he said. Clara stood beside him in a navy suit with a badge that read Director of Ethics and Employee Trust. Her office was on the executive floor, but every Thursday morning she worked at the reception desk. Daniel once asked why. Because people tell the truth differently when they think no one important is listening, she said. The new lobby had no private list of visitors who could be turned away. Every message received a tracking number. Every employee could contact the board's ethics committee without a supervisor's permission. Karen ran the system. On her desk sat a framed copy of the word Clara had written across Nolan's offer. No. Her son was halfway through his first year of college. Evelyn came through the front doors carrying 2 cups of tea. She signed the visitor book slowly, leaving the 2 small dots Clara had noticed a year earlier. This time, Daniel was waiting for her. Their weekly lunches could not restore 11 lost years. They could only fill the years still available. Sophie often joined them. She had become the first independent chair of the family trust, and she required every major decision to include a worker review. Justice had arrived, though not in the simple form some people wanted. Nolan pleaded guilty to the sale fraud while the fire investigation continued. He wrote Daniel a letter asking to be forgiven. Daniel showed it to Clara. "What would you do?" he asked. "Forgiveness is not the same as pretending there should be no consequence," she said. "You can put down the anger without carrying him out of the courtroom." Daniel visited Nolan once. He did not excuse him. He did not promise friendship. He only said he would no longer build his life around hatred. Then he left the room lighter than he had entered it. At the Riverside anniversary dinner, Daniel stood before 800 workers and began a speech about courage. Clara watched him unfold 3 polished pages. He looked at Frank, at Evelyn, and at the receptionist's desk placed near the stage as a reminder of where the truth had first been heard. Then he folded the speech again. "A year ago," he said, "I believed leadership meant being the person who made the final decision. I was wrong. Leadership is making sure the quietest person can interrupt you before the final decision becomes a disaster." After dinner, Daniel found her alone near Grace's photograph. "My mother says 8 invitations is enough evidence that persistence runs in our family," he said. "Would you have dinner with me Friday? No contracts. No board members. Just dinner." Clara smiled. "Are you asking as my CEO?" "I'm asking as the man who almost signed the wrong future." She made him wait 1 gentle second. "Friday," she said softly. Across the room, Frank watched them and smiled, though he could not remember Daniel's name. He remembered that this was the man Grace had wanted to hear the tape, and for that night, it was enough. The $40 million contract was later displayed in the memorial room and signed. Visitors often stared at the blank line where Daniel's name should have been. Most assumed the empty space was what saved the company. It was not. What saved it was a woman who had spent years caring for people others overlooked. She noticed a shaking hand. She kept letters she was told to destroy. She spoke while powerful people expected her to disappear. Everyone eventually understood one final thing. A title can place someone at the head of a table, but it cannot make that person the wisest voice in the room. Sometimes that voice is standing quietly beside the coffee tray, waiting for the courage to whisper.